It all started with a dream that was so small, so humble, it almost felt ridiculous to think anyone could be threatened by it. I wasn't trying to build an empire. I wasn't trying to take over the world. I wasn't even trying to compete with the big fancy salons downtown. All I wanted was to cut hair out of my garage, save a little money, and maybe bring some life back into a neighborhood that had felt dead for years. I'd always loved cutting hair. There's something about the buzz of the clippers, the snip of the scissors, the look of satisfaction when someone sees themselves fresh and sharp in the mirror. It's more than just a job. It's a kind of therapy. And, for me, it was a way to support my family without killing myself at a 9-to-5 I hated. So, I took a chance. I bought decent equipment, painted up the garage, laid down some tile, put in good lighting, and made that space feel professional. My neighbors noticed. At first, it was curiosity. Then, it was support. Word spread quickly. People would rather pay a fair price to a neighbor they trusted than some overpriced chain. Before I knew it, I was busy every evening and weekend. The shop became more than just a place for haircuts. It was where guys came to talk, kids came to laugh, and even some of the older folks came just to sit, sip coffee, and feel connected. It felt like a community again. But of course, good things have a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. Enter the HOA. Now, if you've ever lived under one, you know exactly the kind of people who get drunk off that tiny sip of power. The president of ours, a smug guy named Richard. You know the type. Ironed polos, perfectly manicured lawn. Walks like the world owes him space. Decided my little operation was an eyesore and a violation of community standards. He came by one evening uninvited just as I was sweeping up hair. He didn't knock. He just walked in like he owned the place. "This," he said, looking around with that condescending half-smile, "is not permitted. Businesses can't operate out of residential garages. It's in the bylaws." The way he said it, like I was some criminal, made my blood boil. But I kept my cool. I explained that it was just haircuts, no noise, no traffic, and that the neighbors actually loved it. He didn't care. His eyes weren't seeing my shop, they were seeing a chance to flex authority. The next week, the letters started. Thin, white envelopes in my mailbox with that HOA letterhead. Violation notice. Cease and desist. Failure to comply will result in fines. Each one felt like a punch to the gut. I'd worked so hard to make this place something positive, and now it was being treated like a crime scene. I appealed, of course. I wrote letters. I showed up at the board meetings. I even brought some of my neighbors along to vouch for me. One after another, they spoke up about how much they loved the shop. But every time, Richard would shake his head, shuffle papers, and say, "Rules are rules." The rest of the board? Sheep. They followed his lead. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't actually care. They just didn't want to cross him. The whole thing felt like a trial where the verdict had already been written. And, sure enough, a month later, I got the final notice. My shop was officially shut down. If I didn't comply, they'd slap me with fines big enough to drown me in debt. I can't explain the heartbreak. That garage had been more than 4 walls. It was my hope, my independence, my way of giving my family a better life. And to have it taken away by a smug HOA president with too much free time, it made me feel powerless. The nights after the shutdown were the worst. I'd sit in the empty garage, tools packed away, chairs stacked in the corner, and it felt like a tomb. The laughter, the conversations, the clippers buzzing, it was all gone. And all I could hear was Richard's voice in my head, cold and smug. Rules are rules. But life has a strange way of handing you weapons when you least expect it. I managed to get a part-time spot at a local salon a couple miles away. It wasn't mine, but it was work. I told myself to swallow my pride, rebuild slowly, and keep cutting. And then, one quiet afternoon, fate walked through the door. Or rather, sat in my chair. Richard. Yes, the same man who had gleefully shut down my livelihood. At first, he didn't even recognize me. He just strutted in, demanded a clean, professional cut, and plopped down like he owned the place. My stomach flipped. My hands tightened around the scissors. It was him. Of all the barbers in the city, of all the chairs in all the salons, he had chosen mine. In that moment, every sleepless night, every letter, every humiliation flashed through my mind. I thought about my kids asking why Dad wasn't working in the garage anymore. I thought about the neighbors shaking their heads in disappointment when I told them the shop was gone. And I thought about Richard's smug grin at that final board meeting. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and heavy. But underneath it, a calmer, colder voice whispered, "This is your chance." Now, let me be clear. I'm not a cruel person. Revenge isn't usually my game. But sitting there, with him oblivious in my chair, asking for a professional cut after he'd cut my future to shreds, it felt like the universe was putting scissors directly in my hands and saying, "Do what needs to be done." I started snipping, slowly, carefully, outwardly calm, but inside every snip was a release of frustration. I deliberately tilted the balance, clipped unevenly, blended one side too short, left the other awkwardly long. At first, it looked subtle, but as the cut went on, the disaster became clear. His clean professional cut was turning into something between a lopsided lawnmower accident and a toddler's art project. When I spun the chair toward the mirror, I'll never forget his face. His smugness cracked into confusion, then horror. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no words came out at first. Then, finally, "What did you do?" His voice trembled with disbelief. I leaned on the counter, looked him square in the eye, and let the cold truth drop. "Guess it's tough when someone else cuts you down, huh?" The silence after that was beautiful. He stammered, threatened to complain, but the damage was already done. He walked out with his head low, his perfect little image shattered for everyone to see. That walk of shame, him trying to hide his disaster of a haircut, was the sweetest sight I'd ever seen. Word got around, too. People noticed. For weeks, neighbors whispered, chuckled, and gave him side eyes. The mighty HOA president, the man who prided himself on control and image, had been humbled by something as simple as a pair of clippers. And me? I felt lighter. It wasn't about the haircut, not really. It was about balance, about karma finally buzzing back in his direction. I knew I'd still have to work hard to rebuild, but that night when I sat in my garage again, it didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like justice had finally been served. Sometimes revenge doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in the quiet snip of scissors, the uneven line of a haircut, and the look on a man's face when he realizes that the power he used to crush someone else has turned around and cut him instead. And let me tell you, it was the most satisfying haircut of my life.